Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining today's web conference, Responder and Farmer Wellbeing Before, During, and After an Animal Health Emergency. Before we begin, please ensure you have opened the WebEx participant and chat panels by using the associated icons located at the bottom of your screen. Note that all audio connections are muted at this time, but if you require technical assistance, please send a private chat message to the event producer in the WebEx chat. With that, I'll turn the call over to Liz Fernandez. Liz, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Fernandez with the Professional Development Services Branch, and I would also like to welcome you to today's webinar. Our speaker today is Edward Malek. Edward is a National Animal Health Operations Specialist with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, developing operational policy and guidance for the poultry hatchery program and emergency preparedness for the compensation and disposal of animals. Edward is a graduate of the University of Guelph and has presented on wellness awareness at various conferences in Canada and the United States. With that, I will turn the webinar over to Edward.
Thank you, Liz, and good morning to everybody that's joining us today. We're going to have a very interesting conversation, and I think many of these slides may be pertinent to some of the people that have some fears around COVID-19 and dealing with that. So, as everybody said, it is Responder and Farmer Wellbeing Before, During, and After an Animal Health Emergency. The majority of it will be on the responders, but this also has been shared with industry in the past so that they can develop mechanisms of assisting the farmer. But also, as a responder, we need to be aware of how we can assist a farmer through this process. Oh, here we go. So, the idea is, with wellness, is one thing at a time, most important thing first, and start now. So a little bit of things to think about. We're going to talk about well-being, how the mind actually functions and why it goes into trouble during an emergency, some bit of planning, headlines, perspective, which are all very important, awareness, and, of course, the structure of a response. As I said, supporting farmers, things that you can do, and of course, when to get help. And there will be room at the end for questions. So we have to give a notice. We've got to keep the legal happy. So this presentation is about the awareness of well-being and its maintenance from a variety of references and sources. Any suggestions are not to be used as a treatment or a diagnosis. In any case of difficulty coping, please contact a professional for assistance immediately. So I always like this slide. I've used it many a times before, that farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from the cornfield, from President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And it gets into later on when we start talking about perception as to how we perceive a farming operation runs or operates, and then when we get on site to respond and actually have made a lot of assumptions as to how they're truly operating. So what exactly is well-being? Well-being has 5 types, and as you mature, you'll go through the 5 types. So most importantly, when we start off, is career, hence why when people lose a job or downsizing, or when there's even talk of cuts, how stressed out people can become because they're losing their identity. Next, we get into social, identity, financial, physical, and then, of course, community. And you'll see when they talk about the blue zones on the earth where people live well beyond 100 years old, they have a combination of all 5 types of well-being. And well-being is part of is the ultimate goal, but how we get there is different between people. We all have our own different things that work better than others, but the whole idea is that this presentation will be giving you ideas as to what's been shown to work on most people, and then you can make it specific to yourself later on. So I think the most important part is behavior patterns that may indicate a lack of well-being. So you may think you're feeling really, really good and doing well, But some of the behavior patterns to indicate are withdrawal, isolation, or avoidance. Pretty hard right now when we're being told to stay home and be away from everybody else, of social distance. Tardiness, high and low mood swings, irritability and impatience, anytime relationship issues or conflict with others. So normal relationships do have mild conflict. It's when that there's conflict with all others at the same time. Stressful, anxiety, fearlessness, or lack of confidence. So once again, the pendulum swinging from one side of being completely fearless to the other side of having the anxiety and the confidence. Confusion, reduced concentration or forgetfulness, overreactions to negative feedback, complaints of unexplained aches and pains, frequent illnesses. So to have an illness once or twice a year is probably quite normal, but people that are not being well are going through many of these on a regular time, one after the other. And of course, a high rate of accidents on and off the job. So the best example is usually when there's been a loss of a loved one in a family or a divorce in a family. Many of these things will be part of the indicators, but in this case, you actually have a reason, and it's the idea of let's getting it through the process. In Canada, we have a program with one of our major cellular phone providers, and their adage is let's talk as we're all in this together. And I think that's the important part is moving forward, is having conversations, and of course, being better. The other part of wellness is resilience. So resilience is the ability to cope with life's challenges and to adapt to adversity. And your levels of resilience can change over the course of your life. And of course, there's also personal, family, community, and business resilience. And these are very much being talked about right now with COVID-19, but in a disease response, very much so when your major producer company in a town that we saw like in 2015 is shutting down. You know, yes, the farm being integrated also has many other sections that employ a lot of people, and that the family and the community resilience will also take a hit at this time. So many of us are very resilient, but once again, when you are challenged time and time and time again, your resilience will be reduced, and you'll have problems dealing with that. So why does all this happen? There's two different theories. There used to be the three-mind theory, and now there's the two-mind theory. So we have the old mind and the new mind. So we're now into System 1 and System 2. System 2 is 5% of our mind. It's actually about rational thinking. It's also called discovery mode, and it's reasoning. It takes effort. It's slow. It's logical. It's lazy. It's indecisive. And then we have System 1, which goes back to our defensive older brain. So defensive mode, the fight, flight, or freeze mode. And the main way of telling the difference as to which mind you're using or which system you're using is with System 1, typically the words that are being used by the person are never always completely, totally, definitely. So they're very black and white. Whereas in System 2, you're actually reasoning back and forth as to what your positives and negatives are as part of the process. It is important that we have both of these minds because System 1 is unconscious, it's fast, it's associative, it's an automatic pilot. But we have to remember, it comes back from the day that we were hunter-gatherers and there was lions or other animals trying to eat us. So it's very quick. But as we are in a technologically safe world that we're in now, it does seem to overreact many times, and we have to develop ways of coming back and rebooting it. The important part is whenever we get an input, it goes through a filter system. And part of this filtering is It's determined by perception, assumptions, intrinsic and extrinsic motivators that are very subjective and confirmation-based. So once you set your intentions, this will also change your filters. The best example of confirmation-based is the world is round or the world is flat. People that believe one or the other will not even look at the other option. They always will think of the one way. So when on autopilot, what does your brain perceive as important? So this is where in a disease response, you are getting lots of stimuli on a regular basis, and it's necessary to go back into the discovery mode to look at your filters so that you will actually progress forward. And so the mind has this way of being, if it's being automatic, you may actually end up with your important stuff in the spam filter. Much like our computers do, it's not perfect, but it's a way of moving back into discovery mode. And when we are most out of sorts or challenged with new tasks, this is why change is so difficult for many people. And it's just the perception of the process. So how do we get around this? So there is ways of rebooting the mind, especially in the middle of a disease response. The idea is a check mark is probably one of the best positive influences on your mind and on your well-being. Now, just remember that the people that have read these books also develop cell phones. They also develop casinos and other things. So they also have a lot of influences and rewards that will also reboot your mind, but for a different reason. Our reason here is for well-being. And of course, when we get into this feeling, which is an internal state, to get thinking of positive rewards, it also moves into the feelings and then the physiology. So it is a self-replicating process of thinking positive will actually end up with being positive. And of course, positive experiences go a long way to our process. Part of that was too is when I've always responded, I've always used my overtime money as more of a reward of buying something that, like skis or something, that I'll use later on, but it's an idea being is every time I look at those skis, I don't think about the hard work and all the negative things of the disease response. I think of the positive experience of afterwards I'm going skiing and enjoying them. So the best part about self-awareness is being aware of yourself first. And as a disease responder, it's something that we need to be more aware of before we respond, because we really can't change much once we're in. For all of those that think that living in a hotel for 3 weeks is fun, after you've done it a half a dozen times, it's really lost its luster as part of the process. And it's also aware of getting there and getting into the new system, but also to be aware of that you need the rest as part of it. And as I tell all new responders, remember, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. None of our disease responses end up overnight. There's a lot of work going on as part of the process, and it's necessary to keep that in mind, that you have to think the long game, not the short game. So where we are in a much better place now is, in the past, many discovery plans looked like Dilbert there, and that was about it. So, and of course, there's always some part of that too. So it's necessary to understand the basic drives in our mind are related to food, mating, security, play, and social status. And there's also gender and cultural differences. The other part, too, is that our mind allows us to respond to or prepare and respond to an imminent danger, but it has a harder time trying to respond and prepare for a possible danger. And that's why it's important to look at the emergency action plans. And a lot of work has been gone in by industry and by governments, and I think we're getting to be much more realistic with ourselves and with the process. By completing a thorough analysis and description of the individual operation and sites, the planning, and ongoing maintenance and training of the process. Right now, I imagine everybody is dusting off their business continuity plans and their division plans, and the whole idea of crisis response principles is to listen continuously, respond quickly, act decisively, be sensitive and proportionate, communicate persuasively, prepare thoroughly, and collaborate closely. And this gets you from being unprepared to being prepared as part of the process. So I think we're going to be talking a little bit about perspective is what we're moving into now. And I think it's very well aware that industry, like everybody else, has many challenges. They have the environment and everything else. Of course, they're there to make money. There's also the economy that can affect the money potentials. There's emergency response preparedness. We're also in an era of corporate social responsibility, sustainability, risk management, and then we get this bouncing ball in here of the biological hazard or a disease response. So once again, as we learn in incident command, you can usually handle 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 active engagements at a time, but when you get more than that, part of the business planning is to what are we going to deal with today as opposed to what we can deal with later. And I think the other part going on is doing a quick look at the internet over the last couple of months. There's been a lot of updates from what actually happened in 2001 with foot and mouth disease and how many farmers actually committed suicide. There's from December here, 2019, FarmBusiness in the UK, more than 1 farmer a week in the UK dies by suicide. We have what's going on with Farm Aid in the United States. Australia has the Mind Your Head campaign to look at well-being within the farming industry. So stress is often a key factor in many of the accidents, illness, and injuries taking place on farms. And I think, you know, we have to look at where the farm is right now, but how they can get better so that they're better to respond in the future. The Do More Agriculture Foundation is a nonprofit organization focusing on mental health and agriculture across Canada, and I provide these links later. It's very interesting to take a quick look at them, and it also helps to get an idea as to the resources out there already for farmers, but the conversation is beginning. Now, as we get into well-being, the important part is perspective. As we have become addicted to comfort, that when even the most insignificant, inconsequential things distress the perfect picture of the world we have in our head, we get upset. So I think that's the important part, is that in a disease response, you have a farmer that normally runs their industry and their operation alone. They seek guidance, but they don't have a lot of people telling them what to do. And in a disease response, you have a lot of people running in and telling them what to do. And I think it's very important that we look at the perspective and looking at the problem or solutions from different angles just to make sure that we are looking at them the same. Because there are many different points of view, and we have to go back to thinking with that slow discovery brain so that we ask the right questions and we move forward from there on. I always like this slide. When you have opposing forces, it's important to put yourself in the other person's shoes to be aware of their point of view and their perspective. And of course, to me, some people see a frog and some people are able to see the horse. Another part, I think this kind of helps. We have different reviews or views. We have the farmer view, so of the train wreck, and then the responder view, which is kind of a little bit above the train wreck, but also looking for additional train wrecks or premises that may be becoming part of the problem. And by the time we get into a disease response, you're not able to improve your wellness. You're only able to maintain your wellness. Just because it is so visible, these are various pictures taken from around the world and the various disease responses in different languages. And it's no matter what, we have to put the warnings, we have to put the postings out there. The idea being is that we want to limit the amount of people and that we're taking care of on those sites, and we don't want it to extend beyond the site. So it is necessary, and the important part is that this is part of it, but it's also, it takes people's mind away from their specific task. And when we get into disease response, grief and loss of losing a herd is one of the worst things that a farmer can go through. Many of these farms in 2001 in the UK were multi-generational farms. They've been breeding these animals, and it's important to recognize when dealing with farmers going through this process, it's necessary to be patient with others, and that each person has a different journey and goes through the process at a different time. The 7 steps are always shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance. And like I said, people go through them on a different system based on their resilience factors and depending on their well-being ahead of time. And the important part with this group is it's necessary to reach into this group with assistance, as in most cases they will not have any energy to reach out for assistance. So that is one of the things that we have learned as disease response. I remember one response that a new responder said to me, the farmer's really testy and he's really not very happy with us here, and had to take him aside and say, well, we expect that, but once again, it's necessary to have awareness of it and to use your verbal language to help them through the process, but because it is a necessary process. The other part, too, that moves on to this grieving and loss is euthanasia and the human toll and the care and killing paradox. So this is something that affects not only the people doing the euthanasia, but those that are observing it, those are part of it, but also the idea that the animals are dying, because farmers are there to raise animals. And it does have a very stressful effect on everybody that's dealing with these animals. When I responded to AI in 2015 in Nebraska, it was a very small knit unit that took care of the one barn. And one day, as part of their opening, they actually had a religious service to respect the birds that were dead and dying. And it really helped and focused them that they were able to move on and help the rest of them, and it also cemented it in their minds that they were no longer there to rescue or save or continue with the birds. They were there to actually end their life because it was going to be much more effective than dying from disease and that. So that was a very interesting process to go through and a very necessary one and that I learned a lot from. So things that you can do is, of course, focus. Follow a normal routine as much as possible. It's important to eat healthy meals and be careful not to skip meals or to overeat as part of the process. Exercise and stay active. These sound very simple, but they actually help extensively. Help other people in community. So that gets your mind off of the disease response, and it gets you into there's more going on than just that. Accept help from friends, family, coworkers, and talk about your feelings with them. And of course, limit your time around the sights and sounds of what's happening, and don't dwell on media reports. And of course, don't forget to smile. So responding takes a lot of courage, and it isn't the strength to go on, it is going on when you don't have the strength, and of course, learning from other people's mistakes and not your own. Some days it's hard to find motivation, and some days motivation finds you. And of course, during a response, it's no time to assess someone's preventative preparedness and their planning. The idea being is we're there to get the job done, and that's what the hot wash is for later. So, structure, what helps? Structure. We know that incident command is great, and you need to develop new normal goals and structure for daily, weekly, monthly, personal, family, work, business, and community, and remember to be SMART, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So the old idea comes out, how do you eat an elephant? And of course, it's one bite at a time. And that's very much how we have to look at a disease response. Policy and procedures are very important. If you don't have them in peacetime, to try and develop them in the middle of a disease response is very problematic and will put you behind. And it's necessary to have a daily schedule, a weekly schedule that will get you through the process. And the important part is about writing things down. If you actually write items down, even though you have a doctor's handwriting and can't read them later, it puts them in a different part of your memory and will make you less anxious because you have already put down the idea that you have reassured yourself that it's somewhere else written down. It's not always being held in your memory as part of the process. And of course, having tasks around the process and that. So an important lesson during an outbreak too is entropy. If you don't put energy into a system, it will decay. And the important part is, remember, you have a lot of people coming into a disease response, and everybody looks at things differently. So an experience we dealt with years ago is we had a incident commander order power bars for the lunchroom. And then there became a conversation because they actually wanted the energy bars, but they ended up with a whole bunch of plugins for their computers. So it is necessary to, when you're looking for pieces of equipment that are very specific, I like to actually go and add a picture of it to my requisitions slip, because it gives the person who's actually ordering it an idea of what you specifically want, as opposed to them coming back to you many times and trying to ask for what you're looking for. And the other part too is when we're in the middle of a response, it is necessary that we have all parties at the table when major discussions and agreements are occurring. And that's part of the structure. If we're going to have a meeting with the farmer, we try and keep that structure on a regular basis, just so that we don't try and ad hoc people in at the last minute as part of the process. So lessons learned again and again. So take a deep breath and take another deep breath to center yourself and ground yourself. No two responses are alike, so how we responded in the past may or may not happen in the future. Prepare thoroughly and respond decisively and quickly. I always tell people barns are made for the care and handling of animals, not for disease control. So some cases they work and they don't. Paperwork, it's important to keep on top of it daily. Incident command structure, I don't believe there's any other method out there. It's been proven. So train it, maintain it, meetings, meetings, meetings. Keep your meetings on topic and on time. If you need additional meetings, then they can be added in, but you don't want to bring 30 or 40 people into a meeting where you only need 3 or 4. As we said before, be sensitive and proportionate to the response, communicate openly and persuasively, and celebrate the little things, which is very important. Care for yourself and others, and collaborate closely. And this is where the one lesson we learned is about case officers. All of the work that they do with the farmers is a supporting system. As they contact, they collect, they educate, they develop, they coordinate, they oversee and communicate. But also think of yourself, do you want to deal with one person that you can develop some sort of rapport with, or do you want to have 7 people a day coming to you asking for pretty much the same thing over and over again? So it does help support them. And we have to remember, we're there to support the function. If the farmer needs additional support, we can work with industry for them to develop that. But that is part of the necessary buy-in and to get the process through. Once again, keep it simple. So you want to be timely with your message. You want to have your preparation. So if you're having if you're a case officer and having a stressful day, you want to take a few breaths and prepare for your meeting so that you know what you want to get across and what intentions you have. Make your message very clear because it's necessary to get it across in stressful times. And of course, it's necessary to listen. And just came across this the other day. Effective communication in a resource is a resource multiplier during an emergency. There's 5 psychological reactions. So you have vicarious rehearsal. This is where you have a disease response in a state on the West Coast, and then you have people on the East Coast giving you advice and guidance on how to do it better. Which takes away from the response. Denial is a normal process. Stigmatization. We had the daughter of a farmer that had been infected with avian influenza. None of her friends would sit with her on the bus because they stigmatized her. Fear and avoidance as part of the process, and it's normal to go through withdrawal, hopelessness, and helplessness. I'll give you this link. I give this link at the end of the paper too. Beyond Panic Prevention by Dr. Peter Sandman is very interesting on how to adjust your message for these situations to get it across. And of course, it's necessary to be aware of others. So, you know, do we have EAP support as part of the process? So the amount of stress, the work. It's very good to work with health and safety to be aware of how many days a week you want people working before they take a day off so that they can rest and recover. There's always other things to do, proper eating, walking, restaurant, and that too. So what we've always done, or I've always done with working with new groups, is when new people come into the group, take them out to lunch. And of course, when people leave the group, take them out to celebrate and for supper and to celebrate. It's necessary for confidentiality to limit the amount of work at meals, especially if you're in a third-party restaurant. And it also provides you a mental break to think about something else and re-energize yourself as part of the process. It's mostly aware that others may not ask for help, but be aware and ready to step in, especially if you are a manager or supporter of the process. 2010, we were responding to avian influenza. It was just before Christmas, and the farmers, being very religious and always had a after-church visit with their friends and family had asked us if we would mind not responding on Sunday afternoons. So the agreement we had is that we would work till noon or 1 o'clock, and then we would be gone by the time they came back from church. We still had full biosecurity, biocontainment of the premises as part of it, but there wasn't all the activity going on. And this was really good for myself and others because it really ended up that you knew that that was Sunday, that was a partial day of work. Not only that you could always go back to the office and do more paperwork and get caught up on that, but it brought back that you knew which day, that Monday was a start of the week, not just another day in the week. And then what we used to do was then go for a nice big family supper on Sunday afternoon because you had time and effort to prepare for it. The other part, too, is about safety. It's always necessary to think safe and to work safe. Many have seen this slide before, and I know many times in a disease response that we've had people in full PPE, Tyvek, respirators, and then, of course, there's people standing next door to us in shorts and a T-shirt telling us how to move animals around. So stress-releasing activities, we've gone through many of them myself. You want some more exercise. Even going for a walk and clearing your mind makes a big difference. Mindfulness, be in the moment and take some time. 15-minute walks during lunch or coffee breaks are very important. Contact your EAP for personal support. Eat sensibly, drink plenty of water and juices, avoid excessive use of caffeine and alcohol. On our infected premises, we do not have caffeine because to get people all dressed up in PPE and then give them a diuretic you're not going to get your time and effect out of them. It takes a little getting used to, but after you're used to not or having a non-caffeinated drink to replenish you, it actually makes quite a difference as to how much work you get done and focused when you are in containment. Know and respect your own limits, and if you feel exhausted and need to take time off, take it. It's all part of the process, and I think it's necessary to kind of prepare that people are going to take, if they're responding for 21 days, that they need at least half a day or a full day off, that they can get caught up on some of their life skills or their life activities. Spend time with friends and family. We have the most use of the internet than we've ever had, so FaceTime and everything else to catch up. I know I used FaceTime one Christmas to catch up with my stepchildren and my family at Christmas as I was deployed 4 times away. Be on the lookout for any changes in your habits, attitudes, and mood. And, of course, take care of yourself. So when should I get help? Sometimes we need to get help from a health professional such as a psychologist, family doctor, psychiatrist, social worker, or nurse. Ask for help if you can't return to a normal routine, are not able to take care of yourself or your children, are not able to do your job, use alcohol or drugs to get away from your feelings, feel extremely helpless, feel sad or depressed more than 2 weeks, think about suicide, or having thoughts of hurting oneself or others. And, of course, as we move on after a disease response, it's important to plan for the future, reappraise the situation for true facts or assumptions. So what really happened during the disease response and what you assume you happened. Usually this is the time that many people write scathing letters to the hot wash reports as to what they thought happened. Now's a good time to take a really good look as to what actually happened. What can be improved upon? So let's have the positive results coming in to better things in the future, and of course develop some time to follow up on them. Focus on the positive, be mindful. In some cases, some companies may actually need to ditch your sunk costs. They have to take that look. Is it worth me to keep that in business? What is the future cost of staying in? What is the likely cost of extracting yourself? And the important question, should I stay or should I go? This is kind of like people that like to stand on the edge of a cliff to look over it and then take the step back. It's part of that thinking process that it's necessary for me to continue back in this, or it's necessary to try and develop another way going forward. And I think in the couple of weeks and a month after a disease response, it's very important to have that question on a regular basis. Will it matter in a month or a year? And this is where I know the hot washes are typically 6 to 8 weeks out, because you want people to actually then start thinking the more positive efforts. So we're almost there. Every day may not be good, but there is good. There is something good in every day. Words that I live by on a regular basis, and you know, the pendulum does swing back and forth on a regular time, but the important part is that it will swing again. References, very interesting one that recently came up about CDC's multi-approaches to safeguard health, safety, and resilience of Ebola responders, as they sent 4,000 to Africa in 2018. Some from Australia, of course, Kahneman, who talks about System 1 and System 2 brain, the Do More Egg Foundation, and of course Mind Your Head Foundation out of the UK. The important part is, after I gave this presentation to industry in 2015, I actually met a couple of researchers at our University of Guelph in the veterinary medicine and epidemiology group, and they've actually published recently on stress, anxiety, depression, and resilience in Canadian farmers and farmer burnout in Canada. So it's very interesting that a conversation that we had has actually turned into a larger process. I live in a small community, and when I talk to our medical professionals, they're very clear that when farmers come in, it's usually dangling or bloody. They typically don't come in until they absolutely have to. So in order to get your tests or your background on them, you'd better take it right then and there, because you might not see them for a while. And of course, I was just recently, mental health and agriculture has a special issue, and very good resources on how to move forward and how to communicate during this time. So recently came out from Michael Ryan, who's a WHO lead in the EU. If you need to be right before you move, you will never win. Perfection is the enemy of the good when it comes to emergency management. Speed trumps perfection. Everyone is afraid of making a mistake. Everyone is afraid of consequences of error, but the greatest error is not to move and be paralyzed by the fear of failure. And this is where the courage comes in, to be a responder or to be part of that structure, and it's necessary as part of it. So, any questions there, Liz?
Okay, we're waiting to see if we have any questions come through the chat or verbally. Great presentation, Ed.
Thank you very much, Liz.
To ask a question over the phone, please press #2 on your telephone keypad. You'll be notified when your line is unmuted, and then you may state your name and your question. Again, to ask a question on the phone, press #2. And to ask a question anytime via the chat, send your chat questions to all panelists in the WebEx chat. And we'll go to our chat questions first. Liz, back to you.
Okay. Right now, we don't have any right now in the queue.
And our first question is from Doris. She asks, regulatory personnel are almost always perceived as a threat to their animals and therefore them. Surveillance, A, bringing DZ and farm, and B, you might condemn the animals. Depopulation is very difficult and dangerous for all contexts and takes extra effort. And carry yourself and the producer through it.
Yeah, thanks, Doris. I think that's more of a comment for everybody to hear than a question.
And I think, thank you, Doris. And I think it's very important that in the past, we hadn't responded to a lot of animal disease emergencies because we had done so well on tuberculosis, brucellosis, and other diseases that we had been working on in the 60s and the 70s. And then, of course, then came avian influenza in early 2000. And we've had more responses in the last decade than we had in the previous three. And I think it's very important and the agricultural industries get this now, that we do have very extensive disease response plans, but it's also necessary to respond for not only public health, but also for export and economic health at the same time too. And that is truly helping. And I think that, you know, that's part of that case manager role, is to walk the farmer through the process and give them what they need from time to time to help them through the process. Thank you very much, everybody else, for the other positive comments that you've been providing.
Yeah, we had one excellent presentation. I know firsthand Edward follows what you said, very sound advice. Right now we don't have any verbal questions in the queue.
No, and as a reminder, if you have any verbal questions, press #2 on your telephone keypad.
So while we're waiting, let's go ahead and just announce our next webinars. We have another one scheduled for April 9th, and the topic is FMD modeling. And the next webinar after that is on April 14th, titled Public Interface Approaches, and that will address systems used to receive public and industry questions during a FAD outbreak. And yes, we had a question. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the Training and Exercise Plan website, and the link is on the original announcement that went out. But we can send out another one once we know it's been posted. We do have a question. First of all, you said great presentation. In your experience, how would you train a person to perform depopulation of animals to minimize stress?
Thank you, Robert. So this never became an issue for me, because I grew up on a farm and that we raised our own animals. From the time that I was before high school, I helped out at the local slaughterhouse and items like that. So it was very natural for me. And I was walking through a barn one day with a couple other new inspectors on an exercise, and we got talk about euthanizing pigs as part of the process. And at the same time, some of the inspectors were reaching over and scratching the pigs behind their ears and, you know, the back of their humps and that. And all of a sudden, it really hit them as major that tomorrow we're going to euthanize or kill these animals. And I think it's the awareness as part of the process for the people that haven't been on a farm, that we're there for a reason. It's not going to be easy. And I think the most important part is after the job is done and at the end of every day, and this was advice that came out from the UK in 2001, that more social assistance helped during having a pint at the end of the night with supper than with trying to reach out to people that were going to provide them psychological assistance at that very much time. So I think the idea being is if you have questions about the process and that, it's necessary to have those conversations and have those discussions. As a supervisor or manager, it's also necessary to look at the people that are coming into your unit. If you have people that you think are going to have a very psychological negative effect of destruction and disposal, it's perhaps better to maybe move them into surveillance or some other process where they're not going to be affected as part of the process. So I think that's part of it too. Training is part of it at the same time too, and I think that the training process or the exercising process is a much better of people's persona and where they can be best used in a disease response. And I think I would never put a person in a disease response that has a very hard time with euthanasia or with death at that, because it's not going to be a good fit and it's going to upset the whole process. So I think it's, once again, you have to look at it from ahead of time as to how they may respond, and then once they respond, having that conversation to work through the process.
All right, we have another comment and question from Craig Williams at Penn State. He said, we found that doing some small depop demo trainings were effective training issues as for stress and people to identify their roles. Your thoughts?
Yep, training is always good. The problem with euthanasia training is in most cases we don't euthanize. We go through the process, and it doesn't have that true effect. But you're also not exercising completely that you're going to work through all the problems in your system and that. So I think it's like I said, it's very important to go through exercises. It's very good to go through training, but we have to make them very realistic. You'll see firefighters when they train on a burning building. They train as realistically as possible, and I know that's very difficult in many of the areas that we're dealing with, especially with animal welfare and humane handling and that. But it is necessary that we get to somewhat very realistic that can put people through it. There's some work going on right now with the visual. I'm sorry, I'm having a gray moment here right now with computer visualization, and I know it's been very effective in the military to visualize the process you're going through, and maybe we need to look at a little bit more of this as using the technology to walk people through it, and then once again that they could be better assessed as to where they would be most effective in a disease response.
Okay, do we have any verbal questions in the queue?
No questions on the phone right now. Back to you.
Okay, if we have no further questions, I'd like to thank everyone again for joining the webinar today and to bid you all a great afternoon.
Thank you very much, everybody.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Event Services, and you may now disconnect.